Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is our WWE edition of Heel Heat. Now before we go into the show, we took last week off and there was a reason. I needed a little bit of a break, a recharge, and also I wanted to change the format around a bit. The show got to be too linear, too matter of fact for my liking, and I think that reflected on you guys out there and your enjoyment of the show. So I've changed it around a bit. No longer are we going to be linear. No longer is it going to be this match happened here, followed by this match, followed by that match. We've gone to a little bit different format. We basically have broken the show into three categories. The so-so, meaning basically the stuff that's just filler, the bad, and the good. And we put everything into those three categories, and that's how we're going to do our shows going forward. This way, we can tie things together that need to be tied together. We can not talk about stuff as much that isn't as important to the show, and dwell on things that really don't matter in the overall scheme of everything. So, with that being said, we're going to go right into it. First, the stuff that was so-so, or basically filler matches and such to the show. We had Damien Sandow versus Santino Marella, with Big E Langston coming at the end, holding up his belt. I would have enjoyed, and this is why it was so-so, I would have enjoyed better if Sandow just totally demolished Santino. Not that I'm a Santino hater, I think he has his place, and sometimes he can be really funny, sometimes he's a little bit forced. However, to make Sandow a more serious contender for Big E Langston's Intercontinental title, he should have been a vicious destroyer, which we've seen him be at times, and they kind of missed the boat on that, in my opinion. Now the next thing is Sin Cara, which, if you guys don't know, is not being played by the original guy Mystico anymore. He's being played as Hunico, which going forward, if you believe the rumors, will be Sin Cara, and the original Sin Cara will basically be sitting home till his contract runs out. Sin Cara versus Alberto Del Rio once again. Sin Cara picks up the win. The reason this fits into here on the filler and pretty much I don't care section, I've seen this already too many times. I'm not a fan of the lighting. Hunico is a way better Sin Cara than Mystico ever was. He's adapted to the WWE style a lot better. Granted, he's not as flashy and high flying. However, he's not as prone to botching. He's not as prone to injuring himself. I think it's going to be better for the character Sin Cara moving forward, but to me there's some things they still need to work on. The Sin Cara lighting absolutely has to go before I give a shit about him at all. And basically, I mean, I like the idea. I'm lukewarm on two people playing the same character, kind of like Doink the Clown when it went from Matt Bourne to Steve Kern to Brooklyn Brawler and all the other guys that have played Doink, or Max Moon when it moved from Conan to Paul Diamond. I mean, I understand why they do it, and I understand Sin Cara merchandise is actually selling pretty well, why they would want to keep him around. But I wish they would have done something better with Hunico. I'm glad he's getting a shot and an opportunity, because he seems to be somebody that really wants to be there and wants the position that he's given. I hope he can run forward. I just hope they tweak it a little, make it a little bit better. And the last thing in this category is Brodus Clay destroying Xavier Woods. This almost went into the bad category for me, and here's the reason why. Xavier is a relatively new character to television. You're going off the feud that he's doing Brodus's character better than Brodus, and Brodus seems to be jealous, turning to the dark side. I didn't like the fact that Brodus Clay squashed him so badly. Not that Brodus as a monster shouldn't squash Xavier. It was a clean, fair match. If you wanted Brodus to do the squash, he should have maybe attacked before the bell. You know, something of that nature. got the upper hand in a nefarious way to further sell. The way they did it, I didn't quite like with Brodus attacking him after the win, too, and, you know, laying multiple elbows having to be pulled off by Tensai and R-Truth. I think Brodus is going to do wonders as a monster heel. I just don't like how bad they made a new character in Xavier Woods. I don't like how they made him look going forward. I think he's a tremendous wrestler with a tremendous amount of upside, and I know that 1 week isn't going to hurt his trajectory, but people are going to remember this 2-3 weeks down the road. If Xavier doesn't get his comeuppance on Brodus, which WWE is known to just drop storylines in the middle of them, I think that it's going to hurt his development going forward. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go into the section that we call the bad. And this is just stuff that's just terrible. So, this is where we're going to fit in the stuff that embarrasses you to become a wrestling fan. We had the first off, the match between Kofi Kingston and The Miz. This feud is a feud that absolutely no one in the audience, no one in the viewing audience gives a shit about. We've seen this match probably 4,000 times at this point. Heel Miz picks up a cheap win. Kofi, I will say, is the more aggressive Kofi I enjoyed. I think he's past his point. I think we've got to the point where Kofi Kingston, you're not ever going to be able to get him over because there have been so many pushes that started and then sputtered out and then started and then sputtered out and then started again and sputtered out, that I don't think he's ever going to be able to be taken seriously. And it's a shame because he's a damn good athlete and a pretty good in-ring performer. I like the more vicious, more violent Kofi that we've seen, but I just don't care about this match or this feud. And it's a shame because we had a guy, Kofi Kingston, at one point one of the great up-and-comers in WWE, and The Miz, a former WWE champion. There should be something that we care about, but we just don't. And that's why it fits on this part of this list. Next up, we had our Divas match of the night, which it's hard to care about any of those. Natalya versus Tamina. Really odd and clunky match. Natalya, as of late, hasn't been living up to her high standards. She's one of the better women wrestlers on the show. However, the past few months and weeks, she's been putting out clunkers and she's botching a lot. I don't know if it's that she's distracted with the Total Divas taping going along with this, or she's frustrated with her position in the company, or what it is, but it doesn't seem... It seems to me that she's regressing, and instead of progressing and becoming better and better, and it's not even that she's staying on the same level. It seems that she's going back to the level of the competition she's wrestling against. Tamina is solid. She's not great. I think when she's in there with a good wrestler, which Natalya could have been, she could put on some good matches. This was a clunker for me. It just didn't do anything. I wasn't excited. I didn't like the placing on the card right before the main event segment. I mean, to me it was just a clunker, and it drug the show down to a point where I almost fell asleep before the main event segment came on. Now, speaking of segments that drug the show down, this was the Slammies episode of Monday Night Raw. And while not as brutal as the ones of the past, still pretty bad. The only thing of note was Daniel Bryan getting a few Slammies, and obviously We're going to talk about that in a moment. This being Daniel Bryan night, basically. Jesus, the man is so over. If the people in the back making the decisions do not run with this guy very soon, they are going to just cost themselves millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I'm not even talking about the primetime players. But I mean, the Slammies, I'd rather them take and do the Slammies like they used to in like a ballroom setting or whatever, and maybe instead of showing main event one week, have it the hour-long Slammy show. Hardly anybody watches main event. Maybe that'll be an idea to get them to move over to that. Some of the stuff that came out from this Slammies, the Shawn Michaels and Daniel Bryan all interaction, the HB Shizzle Award for the Wrestler of the Year, New Age Outlaws. I thought it was funny that they came out dressed like Dumb and Dumber, because just recently on TNA Wrestling we seen Bad Influence doing the same thing, and I think it's a little bit funny that we're seeing a little more and more of WWE copying storylines and copying stuff from TNA, yet they don't consider them competition. Just think about that going forward. That's a little weird to me. Eve came out. There was a highlight to me. I mean, her segment was deadpan and boring, and the Bellas got a shit reaction, but she looked very good. Eve looked better on the show than she did the last 2 years she was a wrestler, in my opinion. But one guy that looked bad, and is not aging well at all, and that's Bret the Hitman Hart. Every time I see him, he just seems to get older and older, and he's turning into Stu really quickly. I didn't get to see Stu in his prime. I'm just not that old. The only real recollection I have of Stu is when Bret started bringing him around as the old decrepit man, and Bret's kind of in that category now, which makes me feel a little bit old and decrepit myself. But he didn't look too great, and just the Slammies all together, I think it needs to be separated from the show, whether you do it as an online thing only, or you do it, like I said, my idea would be to take the hour you use for main event and make once a year it's a Slammy show. I'd also use that for anything of the nature of, like, if you were to do a Raw SmackDown draft again, I'd put it on main event. Bring some eyes to that show that might not necessarily watch it, and otherwise, you know, not take away, because the Slammies kind of take away from the storylines you got going. Case in point, Mark Henry's a face. They showed a heel turn on there of his. But anyway, that's what I have to say about the bad of the show. Now, before we get into what I thought was good on the show, we're going to do a staple of this show. If you've seen us before, we do a question of the week every week. Now, being we took the week off last week, we don't have one from last week, so we're going to go right into this week's. And it's something I was talking about with my friends Bunkhouse Bob, the lovely Laura, and the Masked Tweeter on their show, the IWX Show. Check it out. It's a great podcast, IWX.com. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it all over. Easiest way to find it is go to IWXshow.com, and you'll see all the links for it. You can look up all the previous shows. Cheap plug for those guys. Good friends of mine. Something that we were talking about, they were talking about is mainstream wrestling, you know, what's wrong with mainstream wrestling, basically. And my theory was the overexposure, which got me thinking of the question of the week for this week. How many hours of wrestling do you personally watch a week, whether it be main event, SmackDown, Raw, Ring of Honor, TNA, any of the local indies you get in the area, DVD? In a general week, how many hours of wrestling do you watch? Let us know. Hit us up on our Facebook, hit us up on Twitter, put it down where? Down there in the comments. And we'll talk about that next week. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go into the segment which we call the good. And this is the stuff that I really rather enjoyed. It started off with the first match of the night, Daniel Bryan versus Fandango. Thought the match was okay. I thought it was a little bit rushed. The Wyatt family coming out at the end trying to recruit Daniel Bryan. absolutely great. I thought that was stupendous. Also, this was the beginning, with the show being in Washington. I think it tinted it a little bit, pushed it a little bit over the quarter, pushed it a little bit past what it normally is, but still he's getting a tremendous reaction everywhere. This was the night of Daniel Bryan. Whether he was winning a Slammy, where he was doing this, or the end segment, Daniel Bryan chants, yes chants, were drowning out anything that anybody else tried to do, and that's absolutely amazing. I think he's the best talent in professional wrestling in the world, and I really think that it's about time somebody needs to listen to the fans and what's going on. Now, another match, speaking of the Wyatts, that I thought was rather good was the Wyatt family, Harper and Rowan versus the Usos. I enjoyed that they keep adding little bits of creepiness to their act. The part where Harper pulls off the sheet mask from Rowan and he's already seething and ready to attack. I thought that was good. I thought that was absolutely great. The two teams put on an amazing match. They're being left off of the tag team championship match. Well, the Wyatts themselves, they got to do the 3-on-1 against Daniel Bryan, but the Usos being left off the tag team championship match on TLC is absolutely an abomination for a team like Rey Mysterio and Big Show, who are relatively new as a team. And, just to me, great match here. And another one was CM Punk versus Dean Ambrose. I thought it was a really good match. Not quite as good as their match on SmackDown, but still a really good match, really solid. And then the thing that everybody liked, and I enjoyed, except for one little thing, which I'll get to that at the end, little pet peeve, was the Ascension ceremony. Randy Orton gave us your generic Randy Orton promo. It was okay. It sold his point. John Cena took what the crowd was doing, chanting and screaming for Daniel Bryan. You had 20 world champions in the ring, which is what they said. I didn't stop and count. 20 former world champions, legends like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, fan favorites like CM Punk, like Christian, all in the ring, and the fans are chanting Daniel Bryan so loud that Triple H can't even talk. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how over this guy is. I think he's the most over wrestler I've ever seen in my 30 years of watching. You got him, you got John Cena, who smartly includes Daniel Bryan in his promo. Wonderful to do that, wonderful to get the crowd onto his side. This was one of the best John Cena promos I've ever seen, bar none. He took a crowd that didn't give two shits about them and turned them back and made them give two shits about him. By the end, they cared about the match. They cared about him. Everything breaks down. You see Orton and Cena start to go at it. Everybody breaks them up. Orton pushes CM Punk. Punk hits Orton, which in case brings Triple H, who hits Punk. Punk hits Triple H. Shawn Michaels super kicks Punk. Daniel Bryan kicks Shawn Michaels in the face. Orton gets ready to do the RKO on Daniel Bryan, who pushes him off, and he inadvertently knocks over Stephanie. And now we get to the part I didn't like. Why in the world would Triple H give the pedigree to Randy Orton? Now, in the real world, you knock over a man's wife, you're going to catch a beat down. I got that. I understand. But this is the world of the WWE, where Randy Orton's the chosen one, part of the authority. Why in the world would he take that opportunity to give him the pedigree, take the spotlight away from the match, which is Cena and Orton, and put a little bit on him? To me, it seemed like Triple H is reaching out and trying to grab a little spotlight that he doesn't have. And I just didn't like it. It was anti what his character should do. His character's not a wrestler anymore. He's a part-time wrestler. He wrestles twice, 3 times a year. So he wrestles just as much as Vicky Guerrero. He needs to start acting like such. He needs to become a punk, become a pussy, basically. He needs to be someone that you don't, he's not the King of Kings anymore. He's the COO. There's a difference. The best comparison I could make, and I know this is in the good segment, and I'm dipping a little bit into the bad on this, is Pat Patterson. One of the absolute great in-ring talents in the history of wrestling. When he became a stooge, or became part of McMahon Corporation, let himself be humiliated every week. One of the great wrestlers we've ever seen. Jerry Briscoe, one of the greatest wrestlers we've ever seen, humiliated every week as a stooge. Sergeant Slaughter, one of the absolute toughest guys in the history of wrestling, put on absolute bloodbaths, violent, gory matches with tons of people all over the world. When he became the commissioner, he was a joke, a laughingstock, getting picked on by Generation X. Point I'm making is Triple H is not better than any of those three. Triple H is a great talent. Do not get me wrong. I am a huge fan of him as a wrestler. I think he needs to realize he's not Triple H the wrestler anymore. He's Triple H the corporate guy, which needs to be a pussy, basically. You can't have the toughest guy in your company being the guy that runs the company. Doesn't make sense. The storyline doesn't work. But anyway, just my 2 cents on that. Now we're going to go into our ratings. If you've seen the show before, this hasn't changed. We got a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 1's a great colleague, 2's a Heath Slater, 3's a Randy Orton, 4's a CM Punk, 5's a Daniel Bryan. I'm giving this a 2, a Heath Slater. There was some good, but the bad and so-so pretty much overwhelmed the whole show. It was a horrible build for a pay-per-view. I really don't think any buy rates are going to jump up because of this for the TLC pay-per-view, and that's the point of the show, is to jump the buy rates. But basically, that's all I have to say about this. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Heel Heat.